On the 28th of July, FIFA told the world it was putting a piece of the World Cup up for sale. 3 days later, the plan was dead. Not softened, not delayed, dead. And the 3 days it took to kill it are the most revealing thing that has happened to football's governing body in a decade. The plan had a name that sounded like paperwork: FIFA Forward Enterprise. It was a for-profit company. Inside it would sit the commercial machinery of the World Cup, the men's tournament and the women's tournament, the television rights, the sponsorships, the licensing, the ticketing, everything that turns a football tournament into money. FIFA would keep majority control. Investors would hold a minority stake with no operational role and no say over the football itself. The valuation was $20 billion. The stake for sale was around 20%, which meant in cash about $4.2 billion paid up front. FIFA presented it as development money, $10 billion for the global game over 4 years. Payments to each member association rising from $8 million a cycle to 20. A one-off grant on top of that worth up to 20 million more. For a federation in a country with no money and no pitches, those are not abstract numbers. They are the difference between having a youth system and not having one. And the deadline to vote on it was the 19th of September, under 2 months. Here's where it started to go wrong, because the associations slow to support the plan were also reportedly the associations that would see reduced access to that funding. So the offer, read plainly, was this: approve the sale of a permanent share of the World Cup quickly and the money arrives. Take your time, and it might not. UEFA did not call that an incentive. UEFA called it a pressure tactic, and within 48 hours, all 55 of its member associations had voted. There is one question that collapses this entire plan before you even get to who was buying. Why? FIFA was not in trouble. FIFA was not short of money. FIFA had just finished the single most profitable 4 years in its history by an enormous margin. So what exactly was the $4.2 billion for? Start with the last cycle. The 4 years that ended with the World Cup in Qatar brought FIFA $7.5 billion. That was, at the time, a record. The cycle that just ended, the one that finished with the 2026 World Cup across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, brought in more than $13 billion. That is not growth. That is a 72% increase in a single cycle. The 2026 tournament alone accounted for around $8.9 billion. 48 teams, 104 matches, American television rights up 94% on Qatar, and FIFA was sitting on reserves of roughly $4.76 billion. Look at that number again. Then look at the money the sale would have raised, $4.2 billion. FIFA was proposing to sell a permanent share of the World Cup, every World Cup forever, for slightly less cash than it already had in the bank. That is the part no press release explains away. You sell future revenue when you need money now. Barcelona did it. Clubs in trouble do it. It is the most expensive form of borrowing there is, because you never stop paying for it. FIFA was not in trouble. FIFA had never been richer, so the plan was not a solution to a problem, which leaves one other kind of explanation. Somebody wanted the structure itself. And a structure is not a neutral thing. Once the World Cup's commercial rights sit inside a private company with outside shareholders, that company owes those shareholders something they can enforce. Not a duty to the game, a duty to the return. So, who was actually buying? This is where the story stops being about football finance and starts being about a very small number of people in a very small number of rooms. Because the idea for this did not come from FIFA's council or its Congress or its members. It came from a conversation. According to Bloomberg, the concept behind FIFA Forward Enterprise came out of private discussions between Gianni Infantino and Josh Kushner. Not last month, last year. Josh Kushner runs Thrive Capital. The fund set to lead the investor group Thrive Eternal was created this year. He is also the brother of Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law. That connection was reported everywhere, and it deserves one piece of honesty. Josh Kushner's most recent political donation went to the Obama Foundation. The family name is not the argument here. The room is. Advising FIFA on the transaction, J.P. Morgan Chase. On the commercial side, Greg Maffei, the former chief executive of Liberty Media, a man whose entire career is built on exactly this, turning sport into a tradable asset. That is the room. A bank, a media financier, a venture fund, and the president of FIFA. It is not the room where football is governed. There are 211 member associations, 6 confederations, a council, a congress. None of them were in that conversation, and the context matters because FIFA's relationship with the American administration had already stopped looking neutral. FIFA opened an office in Trump Tower. FIFA created a peace prize and gave it to Trump. In 2025, Infantino skipped the opening of his own Congress to travel with Trump through the Gulf, and European delegations walked out of the hall. When the American striker Folarin Balogun was suspended for a red card, the suspension was overturned after Trump asked. So, by the time a $20 billion structure appeared with an American venture fund attached to it, the confederations were not being paranoid, they were being consistent. And then there is the detail that turned a bad idea into an accusation. Because buried in the reporting about who would eventually run this new company, there was a name, and it was the same name as the man selling it. That is the moment the argument stopped being about money and started being about him. Gianni Infantino's presidency of FIFA runs to 2031. According to reporting on the structure, once it ended, he could have taken a senior role at FIFA Forward Enterprise, a commissioner, running the company built out of the tournament he governs. The figure reported for that role was around $30 million a year, plus bonuses. For comparison, the reported salary of Roger Goodell, commissioner of the NFL, has been put at $64 million. Take that carefully. It comes from a single account, and FIFA has not confirmed it. But it did not need to be confirmed to do its damage. It only needed to be plausible to the people being asked to vote. And this is the shape of it. The president of a nonprofit proposes converting its central asset into a private company. He does not consult the members who own it. He sets a deadline under 2 months. He attaches funding increases for the ones who agree. And at the end of the process, the reporting says, there is a job waiting for him inside the thing he created. Every part of that can be defended individually, and FIFA did defend it. The structure was legal. FIFA kept control. The development money was real. But football's institutions do not run on legality. They run on an assumption that the man holding the authority is holding it for somebody else. FIFA's own chief operating officer, Kevin Lamore, put it in 6 words. It is the project of one person. He was not wrong. He was also, 3 weeks later, unemployed. What happened next took 72 hours. It is the fastest institutional collapse football has seen since the arrests in Zurich in 2015. Not a negotiation, not a compromise, a flat refusal, and then a series of people walking out of the building, one after another, on the record. On the 30th of July, 2 days after the plan was announced, UEFA's 55 member associations voted. Not a majority, not a heavy majority, all 55 unanimously to boycott FIFA competitions unless the proposal was withdrawn. That is the threat that ends FIFA. A World Cup without Europe is not a World Cup. CONCACAF's 41 members rejected it the same day. On the 31st, Infantino withdrew the plan. And on the same day, Carlos Cordero resigned. Cordero was a presidential advisor, a former Goldman Sachs banker, a former president of U.S. Soccer, and FIFA's own representative on the White House task force for the World Cup. By any reading, an insider, his statement. I cannot stand by while FIFA considers selling a stake in the World Cup. I had no involvement in this proposal, and I oppose it unequivocally. He called it a bad deal for football. Then Kevin Lamore, the chief operating officer, said publicly that FIFA's own staff had been deceived. He did not resign. He said he was speaking for colleagues who could not. On the 17th of August, FIFA terminated him. A week before that, UEFA, CONCACAF, and the AFC had signed a joint open letter. Their words, a fundamental breach of trust, a profound failure of judgment, a proposal advanced on a compressed timeline without meaningful consultation and pushed toward a deadline, and the sentence that will follow Infantino for the rest of his presidency. When trust is broken through deception, when an individual places himself above the collective that entrusted him with authority, that duty has been abandoned. FIFA's response was that this is a concerted and ongoing effort by some to undermine FIFA and its president. And Sepp Blatter, of all people, said no one has the right to sell our game. So the sale is dead and Infantino is still president, which sounds like the story ended there. It did not, because withdrawing the plan never answered the question the plan raised. And there is now a date in September when 211 federations have to decide what they actually believe. To force this to a vote, 43 associations, one-fifth of FIFA's 211 members, have to submit a written request. The deadline is the 23rd of September. If they do, an extraordinary Congress must be called within 3 months, and every association gets one vote, except FIFA statutes contain no article for a vote of no confidence. There is no written procedure for removing a president this way, so even a majority against him becomes a legal argument rather than a result, and there is a trap inside it. If the motion is filed and it fails, Infantino does not merely survive, he is strengthened. He walks into the March 2027 election having been formally challenged and formally kept. That is why the confederations are still counting. Look at what has already moved. Norway called for him to go. The English FA withdrew its support for his re-election. Finland, Wales, Serbia, and Sweden did the same. FIFA's own vice president, Sandor Ciani, withdrew his support on the 19th of August. A supporters petition has been backed by 42 organizations. Against that, real support across Africa and Asia, and the fact that FIFA's funding still flows through the man being voted on. So here is where it stands. The World Cup is not for sale. That was settled in 3 days. But what those 3 days established is that it could have been. The structure existed, the buyers existed, the bank was engaged, and the only thing standing between the tournament and a shareholder register was 55 federations voting fast enough. That protection is not written down anywhere. It's simply held, which leaves the question this whole thing left behind. If the World Cup belongs to the 211 associations that make it, how did it come within 3 days of belonging to somebody else?